Welcome to another Explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely fascinating story coming straight out of southern Brazil. We are exploring how the city of Santa Rosa is basically taking the standard big tech playbook, tearing it up, and reclaiming its own civic data. Instead of just handing over the digital keys of the city to massive corporations, local officials and researchers down there are building an entire smart city ecosystem totally from scratch. They're using open source tools and, crucially, putting the community right at the center of the whole shebang. It's an absolutely remarkable blueprint, and we're going to unpack exactly how they're pulling it off. Okay, let's dive right into this. I want to start off with a really massive question, one that's basically at the heart of our explainer today. Who actually owns a smart city? Usually when we picture a smart city, we imagine these hyper-connected urban spaces run entirely by giant tech companies, right? The data getting scooped up by sensors on our streets, in the parks, on buildings, it almost always ends up locked away in proprietary corporate servers. But the researchers in Santa Rosa are posing a huge dilemma here. Should a city's digital infrastructure be owned by private entities, or should we be treating it as shared public infrastructure? The source material lays out a really sharp contrast here. On one side, you've got the model driven by cloud monopolies. The researchers point out that this traditional model relies on centralized client-server structures, and the problem there is it can lead to hoarding data and leveraging that business power just for profit, rather than actual innovation. On the flip side, we have the Santa Rosa approach. They are pioneering this grassroots, citizen-owned philosophy. By leaning hard into decentralized, open-source technologies, they are legally and technically making sure that the data generated by the city acts as a shared public asset. To get to the heart of what drives them, just look at this quote straight from the research paper. They literally say, data is an asset, and to help innovation, it should flow, like money, rather than remaining static in possession of a few. That right there is their core philosophy. They are looking at data the exact same way we look at electricity or running water. It's a fundamental utility. Because if data just gets locked up in a silo controlled by a couple of massive organizations, well, local startups, researchers, and everyday citizens are completely cut off from the chance to innovate. So here's our game plan for today. We'll hit 1. The Smart City Dilemma, 2. Santa Rosa's Open Blueprint, 3. The SmartLive Lab, 4. Decentralizing data, 5. The Community Impact, and finally, 6. The Future of Open Data. All right, starting us off, Part 1, the Smart City Dilemma. And this brilliantly illustrates the core problem. Think about it. When city planners design a physical town, they spend a ton of time thinking about public access. But when we switch to digital city planning, things suddenly get really murky. The researchers use this powerful metaphor to flip our mindset. Digital roads. If we want people and businesses to move around a physical city, we build public physical roads, right? We don't privatize every single street and force you to pay a toll just to drive across town. Santa Rosa is arguing that data sharing infrastructure has to be treated the exact same way. We desperately need public digital roads so data can flow freely, allowing local businesses to build digital services without being held hostage by crazy fees or restricted access. Which brings us to Part 2, Open Blueprint. So how do you actually build these digital roads without just caving and buying off-the-shelf proprietary systems? Well, it takes time, specifically 12 years. Seriously, this isn't some flash-in-the-pan tech fad that a mayor just decided to launch overnight for good PR. The insights we're digging into today are the result of over a decade of nonstop, dedicated work, real, tangible results, and practical, on-the-ground experience by both the municipality of Santa Rosa and the researchers at Unijuí University. And they definitely haven't been flying blind here. Instead of just buying a bunch of random sensors and hoping for the best, Santa Rosa follows the DC2FC competency framework. Now, this is a super rigorous academic model developed at the University of Cambridge. The whole point of this framework is to prioritize careful planning, highly controlled testing, and slow, deliberate embedding. It is the literal opposite of just indiscriminately tossing technology everywhere just so your city can look smart. The ultimate goal is to make sure any tech they use is responsibly creating actual public value. Moving on to Part 3, the testing ground, known as the SmartLive Lab. Now, what's really interesting about this setup is that to follow that strict Cambridge framework, Santa Rosa needed a real-world place to test everything. Thanks to a 1.3 million reais grant from the state, they built exactly that. They've rolled out a seriously impressive tech arsenal, 26 outdoor LoRa antennas, which, if you don't know, are basically long-range, low-power networks, along with 260 sensors. We're talking sensors tracking temperature, humidity, noise, ambient light, gas, even water pH levels. And every single bit of this feeds back to a central Dell server running Linux and an open-source ChirpStack network. What that means is the underlying code is 100% free and accessible. There's no hidden corporate black box. It's totally transparent. And because of this massive rollout, they're pulling in data at a staggering scale. Check out this number: 410,275. That is how many sensor data entries they've recorded and stored as historical series just since August 2023. This is raw, incredibly valuable open data, beautifully captured, and totally ready to be shared with academics, local businesses, and everyday citizens. That leads us right into part 4, decentralizing data. Because, storing all that data is really only half the battle, right? How do you actually share it securely? Well, that brings us to decentralized technologies. The paper defines these as networks based on peer-to-peer or P2P interactions. So instead of routing every single piece of city data through some giant, centrally controlled server farm owned by a monopoly, decentralized networks are self-organized. They completely bypass those traditional central servers. This is huge because it protects privacy, keeps control local, and most importantly, it stimulates fair competition by pushing data and value right back into the local economy. If you're trying to picture what this means in the real world, the researchers make a really helpful everyday comparison. Just think about the centralized communication apps we all use constantly, like X or WhatsApp. In those ecosystems, one single company dictates the rules and owns all the data. Santa Rosa, however, is exploring decentralized alternatives, things like Blue Sky for social networking or Matrix for messaging. When you apply that peer-to-peer logic to an entire city's data, it ensures the local government acts more like a regulator, keeping things fair, rather than an authoritarian controller holding all the cards. Let's move to part 5 and see how this builds actual community impact. Because, let's be honest, all this open source theory is great, but what does it actually do for everyday people? Well, the impact here beautifully bridges the gap between the urban center and the surrounding rural economy. In the city itself, you've got meteorological stations tracking air quality, and health services using remote body sensors to monitor the elderly. But then, out in the rural zones, the exact same open network is tracking precise soil properties. And get this, local fish farmers are actually tapping into the city's open antennas to monitor the conditions inside their fish tanks. The network even shoots out early warnings to farmers about the risk of a devastating disease called Asian rust hitting their soybean crops, all based on humidity data. It is a completely integrated, living ecosystem. And the impact isn't just about the tech. It's deeply embedded in the people actually building it. The municipality literally designed equality, diversity, and inclusion into the project from day one. The SmartLive Lab research team is incredibly balanced. They've got 7 female and 8 male PhD students, with folks representing all different ages, races, and nationalities. When you consider that the Santa Rosa region is home to more than 20 distinct ethnicities, you realize this team is actively reflecting the diverse public they are building this infrastructure for. And finally, part 6. The future of open data. So what does this open foundation make possible next? Honestly, their tech horizon is moving incredibly fast. They locked in their major lab grant back in 2021, and by August 2023, they were already pulling in massive amounts of open sensor data. Now, looking ahead to 2025, they're gearing up to deploy 10 brand new meteorological stations. Their goal? To collect real-time weather data at such a granular, hyper-local level that they can literally map out the microclimates across the entire region. But their most ambitious goal? Breaking down what they call local data silos. This is a tricky 3-step process. First up, they have to securely retrieve highly sensitive data from isolated legacy databases. Second, they've got to connect these repositories using really robust technical and legal mechanisms. They're actually testing decentralized ID systems for this. And third, once that data is flowing securely, they plan to unleash data-centric artificial intelligence to find insights that were completely invisible before. So the crucial point here is why they are doing this. It's not just to optimize traffic or track weather. The Santa Rosa region unfortunately has an unusually high incidence of cancer compared to the rest of Brazil. By leveraging this open, decentralized framework, the medical sector and researchers want to break open those siloed medical repositories. The big goal is to securely cross-reference health data with environmental stats, eating habits, and genetics to finally investigate and hopefully solve a major local health crisis. They're literally building a smart city to help save lives. It's honestly such an incredible vision of what tech can do when it actually serves the public first. I want to leave you with this final thought today. Take a look at your own city's digital landscape. What could your community achieve if it treated its data as vital, open public infrastructure rather than private corporate property? It's a massive question, but it's one Santa Rosa is already answering. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning how our digital world is built.